Hello everybody, this is Clay, bringing you another observation live commentary video. Right now we're observing a very peculiar folk. I actually am familiar with this person because he's been around for chess.com for quite a long time. His name is Uvek. He has a little bit of profanity in his username, which I will not say. He's notorious as an engine user. His rating is absurd right now, 3,368. I actually looked on his account. The highest rating has been over 4,000. If you have a chess.com account, you can look for yourself. But it looks like he's playing against a legitimate player here, except he's sacrificing a piece, and I'm assuming he's letting his engine run, because now he's playing really strong moves, basically every move. So it's actually pretty entertaining. Obviously, I don't condone this type of playing, but as an observer, it's pretty entertaining to watch. So let's see what, White's obviously down a piece here, but he's making great progress. His knight on e5 is absolutely deadly. His light-scored bishop just covers the whole diagonal, and all of his pawns are beautifully covering many squares, which are preventing the knights from gaining any activity. He's already gained a few pawns back. Looks like he just won a rook too. Maybe not. Knight's hanging. No, it's not hanging, but the bishop's hanging. Now I can, Definitely a interesting position. Rook takes. Yeah, this is busted for black. Yeah, so these games are definitely interesting. Seeing a computer come back from being down a piece. So it's obviously an engine. So of course he makes like manual moves first, and then he just lets the engine run, because the moves are just extraordinarily strong. So let's see how the engine makes progress here. It's sort of a French-like structure. White also has a pawn on f4 to control the e5 square. Queen's kind of misplaced on c2, exactly because rook c8, just attacking the queen. White's obviously better here, up a piece. Puts a knight, solid knight on e5. Black wisely takes with the pawn. Taking with the knight just trades more pieces. And the pawn's actually a bit of a thorn on e4. It controls some important squares, and it's also passed. Now the rook is pretty active on c2. White's pieces are very uncoordinated right now. The bishop on e3 is a little bit loose. The queen is tied to the defense of it. The bishop on e2 is kind of loose too. Black's knight on f6 sort of holds the fort for the king. Now there's some pressure on the light-squared bishop. And he's also got a deadly passed b-pawn. So black is definitely winning here. I don't see any way for him to stop b2 and b1 queen. Unless if white has a perpetual. I actually would have gone queen g6 if I was white, because then you may be able to play queen e8 and queen g6 and just have a perpetual check. Black brings the rook back to stop any checks. These are just a few checks. Yeah, he pre-moved thinking that he would move king e7, but that was not the case. So Uvek wins another game. He's close to 3,400, which is just a stupidly high rating. I'm curious what his strength would be if he played someone like Hikaru Nakamura. I feel like Nakamura, Carlsen would be able to refute, being down a piece here. The Sparkle Flake guy is definitely not 2884 strength. I've seen him play against Amon Hamilton, and just positionally, obviously he's better than me, but he's just not, clearly not 2800 strength. He's probably more of like a 2700, maybe like 2650 kind of player. But his ratings obviously, can only go up playing against this guy. So the key, in my opinion, to play against these engines when up a piece is just to trade everything, because engines often don't try to avoid piece exchanges. Sometimes when you think super objectively, you don't, like they'll notice the eval is slightly better if they get if they trade a piece. But they don't keep in mind that getting to an endgame is completely winning, right? If you're up material. So, So black is, of course, still better here, being up a piece. But white is definitely putting some pressure on the king. Attacking f6. Okay, so he takes out the bishop. Now, white's up one pawn. Now it's even pawns. White's king's a little bit exposed on g1. Excuse me, a little bit of a yawn there. Very interesting. White is queening with check, but white doesn't have any checks anymore. But black doesn't have a way of promoting the pawn. The king on g2 actually is stopping black from promoting. So yeah, Uvek wins another one, down a piece. These games are actually fun to watch. I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, I don't condone engine use, but as an observer, it's kind of fun seeing, really strong chess. So we get another French-like structure here. Black will probably aim to play c5. Bishop a6 makes sense. It's actually pretty common, just to trade off the bad light-squared bishop. Because usually the light-squared bishop gets stuck behind the pawn chain here. So that's why black went for that. White made a slight improvement compared to last game, having the queen on d3 instead of c2. Black has some space. I'm sorry, white has some space. Ooh. So black is... Okay. Black is putting some pressure on the bishop. Maybe he'll just take. Makes sense to just trade here. Rook c1 just to get some more trades in. Maybe rook takes and queen c1. Interesting. Plays there. The idea is to get a passed pawn. White tries to undermine the center, but he has to address the pressure on the c-file. Let's see how white plays this. So black is putting the knight in a pin. White's king is slightly weak here. He's only got one pawn defending it, but it doesn't seem like black has a way of giving check. So white's still up a piece here. So white is okay. Knight takes is forced, otherwise queen takes knight. But black is now probably winning e5 as well. So black has a decent amount of pawns here, and white's king is a little bit exposed, so white has to be careful here. He's only got 2 seconds, so black should probably just win this. Yeah, threatening rook, excuse me, queen g2. And, throws in, yeah, one on time again. Very impressive game. Are they going to play another? That is the question. As of right now, it doesn't look like it. I'll wait a little bit to see if they find a game. So yeah, I was looking in his account. Yeah, 3391 is just a stupidly high rating. I wonder what his actual strength would be if he played against legitimate players. Legitimate players is the wrong word. Players that have legitimate bullet ratings, I should say. Like, I would love to see how Nakamura does against this guy. Down a piece and stuff. And the other thing I noticed is that his playing isn't very fast. It's just really strong. So, like, if you look here, 14 moves, he only has 40 seconds, right? So I feel like the other side could play, like, a really solid blockade opening, like the Hippo, and win on time by just maneuvering the pieces a bunch of times. Sometimes computers don't know how to break down the Hippo, or if they do, it takes them at least like 40 moves, 40 or 50 moves. So if I was playing against this engine, I would very likely play the Hippo opening. If you don't know what that is, it's basically you just move a bunch of pawns to the third rank. So you play like you play a b3. You play d3, e3, g3, have your bishops fianchettoed, so it's a double fianchetto, and then you have both of your knights on d2 and e2. And basically, you just try to close the position. So every time Looks like white has this in the bag, or black has this in the bag, by the way. So basically every time your opponent tries to make a pawn break, say with like e4 or d4, you just close the position. And the idea is just to win on time. So, okay. So black has this in the bag. He played pretty well. Let's move a pawn, maybe. You can just play c2, or there. Yeah, that works. All right, so Sparkle won one. Because his rating is significantly lower, he's basically just, he can only go up. He'll lose like 1 point for a loss, but gain 15 for a win. So it's basically a, a win-win playing against this Uvek character. So now he's down to 3,300. The only human that's reached 3,300 is actually Carlsen, when he's played 1-1 for the death match. The first death match against Nakamura, he started at the rating of 3,300. So Naka's highest rating, from what I remember, is like 3,275, something like that. Penguin's been pretty high too. He plays 30-second chess really well. He's got a really good mouse. Just also like a really quick reaction time. So he's definitely strong at lower time control chess. In my opinion, chess starts not becoming chess after a minute. Like anything shorter than a minute is barely chess, in my opinion. So white's up a piece here, but his pieces suck. Like the bishop on e1 is just absolute garbage. The pawns on the king's side block it out, and then black's pawn on b4 prevents it from developing anywhere. So white is desperately trying to just trade off the knight for the bishop, but the knight is just moving around, and it's just preventing white from making any progress. But he manages to trade knight for knight. That's a tricky move, because now a2 promotes. And black should be winning this. It's too hard for white to coordinate his pieces. The bishop just sucks. And yeah, I think black is going to win this. The king just needs to protect the bishop, because the bishop protects the rook. And so if you can have that, then all your pieces are defending each other. So when you're down, when you don't have the queen, and you say have like two rooks, or a rook and a bishop, or a rook and a knight, the idea, maybe this is obvious, but I guess for newer players, it's important to have your pieces coordinated. Because the queen can just move everywhere and give all sorts of checks and stuff like that. And if your pieces aren't protected or coordinated, basically the same thing, it's very likely that you'll lose material. So Uvek wins another one. Are they going to play more? That is the question. That is the question. Okay, now he's playing against Free Rockport, 2,700. So Uvek actually won't even gain points for this game because it's a 600-point difference. Unless if his rating is provisional. If your rating is provisional, you can win against players that are more than 600 points lower than you. But if you're not, then you don't gain any points. 600 is the maximum rating difference. So black's up a piece here, obviously. White has a pretty good center. Excuse me. Black's knight on h6 is a little bit questionable. So is the bishop on e8. So black doesn't have very good coordination right now. White's just winning the e7 pawn. And he can bring a knight to e5 next. Or play e5. I meant to say d5. So now I can take the knight. So Uvek has won his piece back and is up a pawn. He gets tempo on the knight, so black doesn't have time to take on b2. He takes another pawn, so now he's got two connected pass pawns on the queen's side. And he agrees to a draw. That's kind of funny. Obviously, black was just completely busted there with those 2 pawns, and with engine play, you're not gonna defend it. So okay, you just gotta play fast as white. You gotta play really passive, have a solid fortress, and just hold on for dear life, or try to trade pieces. Trade as many pieces as possible. For newer players, that's always a good way to convert a winning position, or rather a position where you're up material, is to just trade pieces. Because the simpler the position is, you know, the less pieces on the board, the less work it takes to convert a win. If you imagine that all the pieces are off the board, and say it's, you know, you have the extra piece versus a king and pawn, it's really easy to win that. But it's a little bit trickier when there's a bunch of pieces on the board, because the other side can potentially get activity, and things like that. So white's got the bishop pair. His light squares are definitely exposed. Fortunately, he has a light squared bishop. White's coordination is a little bit iffy. What's the idea of knight c5? Yeah, I don't think a3 was a good move. That made absolutely no sense. Black is now winning the piece back. And even more. Yeah, the whole house is falling. So Uvek wins that one. So on to the next one.
Working on finishing technically all these session notes I've written in the past week. Just keep going.
Okay, pretty normal so far. Black has a little bit more control in the center. White's trying to develop his pieces, improve them. Black is clearly better here. Maybe just trade a knight. Just trade some pieces. Knight takes. Looks like the e4 pawn is slightly weak. Attacked 2 times, defended once. He had to take care of the bishop first. Black has a pretty solid knight on d3. White is attacking f7. Rook f8 is probably forced. Now he takes on e4. I would trade queens here. I would definitely trade queens here. Okay, now he does it, but it seemed like it was better earlier, because now the rook is kind of active. Uvek is definitely getting some activity and compensation. Looks like he's just going to win the a4 pawn now. Yep, e4 protects the bishop. Ooh, yeah, now he just lost a piece. So Uvek's up a pawn, and way up on time. He defends the g3 point, takes out a pawn, so the e-pawn is just going to win the game. Black can give a few checks, but it amounts to nothing. This is, it's kind of like a Lucena position, but easier to play, because the black king is a little trapped. Can't move up. So another win by Uvek, down a piece. Pretty impressive. Well, it's not impressive. I mean, it's an engine playing, but from a chess point of view, to win down a piece is, you know, it's good. All right, next game. Black wisely trades a piece here. White's threatening to play knight c7. Knight a6 covers that. White covers his c5 pawn. So he's got a pretty strong pawn chain on the queen side and a pawn majority, so he might be able to produce a pass pawn later in the game. Yeah, he's just losing the bishop there. And if the bishop moves, knight takes, just wins the knight. So very uncomfortable for black. Another loss for him. Okay, so he's playing Sparkle Flake again. Sparkle Flake should really consider just playing a hippo setup and just winning on time. because I feel like you can survive 60 moves. Uvek, well, he actually plays a little bit slower. I mean, it's around a move a second, maybe even less. So let's see how the engine takes control over this position. It's another French-like setup. We're seeing this consistently. So apparently this computer likes the French defense, or the French pawn setup. So, black has a pawn in, white has a pawn in black's camp, I mean, and black has a pawn usually in white's camp at some point if you play c4. White has more space, although black usually puts pressure on d4. It's usually a dynamic position, but balanced. Looks like black is winning the h5 pawn, if I'm not mistaken. Oh yeah, the queen takes. I think white's doing fine here. Black will take on b2, but maybe rook b1, and you can scoop up the b6 pawn potentially, or trade a pair of rooks. Looks like black is maybe winning d4, maybe not. Black does have a passed pawn, which is slightly dangerous. His bishop isn't too good, but it is covering the pawn. I think white should welcome another trade of pieces. His knight on f6 looks good, but it's actually kind of offsides. And black is definitely continuing with this pawn. He can get a bishop on c4 and get a rook on b1. So play a2 and then bring the rook to b1 and it's over. Yeah. Why did he... What? What in the world? Why did he play that? Why did he put his bishop on e2? He should have just kept it on c4. Well, that's weird. Maybe Uvek was playing there at the end or something. I'm not sure. That was definitely not computer moves to just lose the pawn like that. I mean, a 1400 player could have seen that pattern there to win that game. So, all right. Well, thanks for watching.